I think people who look at building portfolios, when you're a young investor, you want to go and buy a 1 or 2 bedroom unit in Surrey Hills, then you might go and buy a terrace in Newtown, then you might go and buy a terrace in Paddington, for example. You might end up buying a house in the Lower North Shore or the Inner West or the Western Suburbs. You've invested in these different places, and the goal might be, you might try and keep all of them and rent a house or buy a house that you want to live in, the suburb you want to live in. Or you might say, you know what, I'm going to sell 2 of those to help me buy the bigger home. When you get to the point of a significant portfolio, you might say, I'm going to start selling these individual assets and I'm going to buy that block of units, or I'm going to go and buy that shop top housing, or I'm going to buy this commercial asset or industrial property. And I think that as you change and filter your way through residential versus different asset classes, from an investor's point of view, that's where things really start to get exciting, in my opinion.
So you talk to lots of people. And I know you don't. I don't know. Do you auction in Brisbane and Melbourne, places like that?
We do some auctions over in those states.
But you talk to agents from these places, and you go along to these events. You talk to agents. You mentioned you talked to agents from Perth recently.
Yep.
Are there any places in Australia that you think have perhaps greater potential than Sydney right now? I mean, we got the Brisbane and we got the 2032 Olympics coming up. There seems to be the weather up there is better. It's not as crowded as Sydney. I mean, it's just something about Brisbane that sort of gets my interest, and the Gold Coast.
Yep.
By the way, at the moment, I never would have said that about the Gold Coast 5-10 years ago, but these days I do say that about the Gold Coast. Are there areas, other places outside of Sydney that you personally think have some?
Well,
strength?
Brisbane's the obvious one for all the reasons that you just mentioned. Accessibility from Sydney is also really good because it's a short flight to Brisbane or onto the Gold Coast. But one of the exciting parts, and honestly, after speaking to a lot of these agents over in Perth, and these are guys that are doing between 100 transactions, 200 transactions a year. One agent, Arash, that I spoke to, who works for the agency over there, this guy's doing 380 transactions a year. Okay, so
that's one a day.
They know what they're talking about. And if they're excited about the market, I think there is a lot to be excited about the market over there. I think one thing that holds us back thinking about Perth is that living in Sydney, we're so far away from it. But when you're immersed in that state and you live there and you live and breathe it, you can see the opportunity because the average sale price is so much lower than what we know here in Sydney. So affordability becomes a big thing, Mark. And if you just can't afford to live in Sydney, you've got to look elsewhere. And to be frank, Brisbane's catching up. Brisbane's really catching up to Sydney. Melbourne's lagging, as I said, for all those reasons. But for me as an investor, I like the resilience of the Sydney market. I like to feel and touch where my money is. There's something about being able to drive past and go, oh, I own that unit or I own that terrace. Maybe that's a little bit short-sighted of me, but being able to know what it is that you have, I think it's a good thing.
Well, one of the things I've always said is if it's more than an hour away, I should own it. So Brisbane's only an hour away, so I guess it's not too bad. Gold Coast is only an hour away. Perth, but I used to live in Perth. I had an apartment in Perth 35 years ago.
Didn't do much for a long time.
It did not. It didn't. In fact, what I paid for it is what I sold it for. I lived there for about 4 or 5 years. I can't remember now, 5 years. I don't think I made much money on it, but it was fun owning a place there. But I understand the mathematics of the dynamics of the mathematics between Sydney people and Melbourne people and Adelaide people perhaps buying in Perth because you've got there's land tax advantages, spreading your risk. Perth economically is the only state that has a surplus. West Australia is the only state that has a surplus, an economic surplus, because of all the royalties they get from all the mining companies. Perth does not have anywhere near the congestion that the 3 major cities on the East Coast have. Perth's a bit of has the lowest vacancy rate, has the lowest unemployment in Australia, apart from Canberra. But Canberra's obvious, they all work for the government. There's a lot of data points that make Perth, you've mentioned to me, that make Perth sound to me to be a very good alternative for diversification in a portfolio basis.
Yep.
And I can see why people are, and I reckon Adelaide is doing that because we don't. We have an office in Perth that's not very big, but we have a few offices in Adelaide. Our Adelaide branch for Yellowbrick Road, by transaction number, is the biggest office in the country.
Yep.
We do more transactions out of our Adelaide Brighton office, which is a record Brighton, than we do in any other office in Australia, and that includes all our aggregator brokers too, which got 1,200 so around the country. So, and Adelaide is, and they tell me the reason why, Damien, is that they get people just ringing up online and buying properties, and they can borrow. The average house, you can buy a house over $600,000.
That's it. They're buying them sight unseen. And you take Perth, for example, in the same example I spoke about earlier. If you're buying that 2-bedroom unit for $400,000, I think they're renting them out for like $500-600 a week.
Yeah.
Whereas in Sydney, you go and buy a 2-bedroom unit in Coogee for 1.3 million, you're getting $700-800 a week.
Yeah, so you're getting like 2 or 3% return. Over there, you're getting 6 or 7% return.
Yeah.
And that pays a mortgage.
Absolutely. The exciting thing about the Sydney market, as I said, is that you can drive past, you own it. There's something really nice about that. They're not making any more landmark in Bondi, Coogee, Maroubra, Clovelly, Bronte. If you go into Vaucluse, Rose Bay, Bellevue Hill, mate, Bellevue Hill I reckon is one of the best markets in the whole of the eastern suburbs. They're not making any more land in those areas. There's only one way that real estate's going to go in those markets, and that's up. Whether it be a fast trajectory, a medium trajectory, it is going up.
I feel like I'm going to make a bid. I heard you say that at a Mossman auction recently. You said there's not going to be many more houses like this come on the market. Federation actually went through the whole series, north-facing backyard, garage, everything like that.
Yep.
And I thought, yeah, he's right. and I was the vendor. Maybe I shouldn't sell. That was going through my mind.
Well, once I was doing an auction and I was calling it quickly and I was pretending I was going to sell it, and the owner shouted out, "Don't sell it."
No.
I was like, I'm not going to sell it. It's okay. It's a bit of auctioneer trickery. I'm just trying to get them to bid.